The concern surrounding the coming war with Iraq is that while almost everyone agrees that Saddam Hussein is a brutal dictator, many people doubt that he poses an immediate threat to Britain, or that he's linked to the people who attacked America on September the 11th, 2001. So, are we going to war to satisfy the need for American revenge and on America's timetable? Tricia Bingley and Alec Clark, you both lost children in the attack on the World Trade Center. You'd have thought that you would support a war against Iraq.
I could support, possibly, a war against Iraq with a second resolution. And I agree with you. There has been an enormous amount of aggression coming out from the USA post-September the 11th. And what really, really bothers me is that it is demonizing Muslims around the world, and that moderate Muslims, good moderate Muslims in all sorts of countries are being driven to Islamic fundamentalism. And this is going to be a problem that will go on and on and on.
Mr. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's a perfectly reasonable point. There are points there that I would agree with. I mean, I'll just point out that I was talking a moment ago about the other two conflicts I was involved in. One was in Kosovo, where we went to save Kosovo Muslims against a Serb Orthodox Christian regime. And I think it's important to realize we may be right, we may be wrong in the action against Saddam, but it's not because Iraq is a Muslim country. I would like to suggest to you that I think, however, there are two real problems that we have at the moment. One, I think that for the Arab and Muslim world, easily the biggest issue for them is the Middle East peace process. And if we were able to restart that and gain some momentum in that, I think that would take a lot of this poison in the atmosphere between the Arab Muslim world on the one hand and the West on the other. And the second is that I just think we need greater understanding between the religious faiths and greater dialogue, because in fact what these extremists are doing is a complete perversion of the true faith of Islam. And one of the things I hope that we don't lose sight of, whatever happens in relation to Iraq, is the need to push forward on both those points. Otherwise, I agree, there is a risk of what you say happening, and I'm trying to work against it.
Well, let's hear from Tricia Bingley. You also lost a child in the World Trade Center.
I lost my only child in the World Trade Center. Now, for the last 18 months, my pain has been unbearable. I can't describe to you how I feel and how I will feel to the rest of my life. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Iraq, there was no link between Iraq and the attack of the World Trade Center. And I also say to you that I just can't imagine other mothers going through what I have gone through. And I wouldn't wish it on other mothers, mothers in Iraq, the mothers of the soldiers that are going out to war, when there's no justification for this war at this moment in time. Let the inspectors go in. And as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Blair, your attack in Iraq with George Bush, and it's not dissimilar to what Bin Laden or the Al-Qaeda network done to America. They killed 3,000 or more innocent victims. How many innocent victims are you going to kill, and how many people is going to suffer like I've suffered?
But on the
No, Mr. Blair, don't do it.
Well, when we took action in respect of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, whenever you take military action, it is true that innocent people die as well as guilty ones, but sometimes you have to take that action if it's the only way of dealing with the threat that is there. Look, I know what I say, I'm not going to convince you on it, but let me just tell you what my fear is. My fear is that if we allow Iraq to carry on developing these weapons, if we have terrorist groups that as you will know better than anyone here, are prepared to kill, they would have killed 30,000. They would have killed 300,000.
But the point
if
is,
they
Prime
could.
Minister,
No, let me just finish this. If we allow these groups to get hold of these types of weapons, then how many people will die? Now that's my worry. I don't have a monopoly of wisdom on this at all. I simply have a judgment which I'm trying to make on the basis of the weapons that these countries like Iraq have, and the desire of these terrorists to do the maximum damage to everything we stand for, our way of life and innocent people.
But don't you think it's going to exacerbate the extremist terrorists? You're giving them the perfect excuse to use whatever weapons they've got, not just in Iraq, but all the other extreme groups.
Well, I think that's a very good point, and let me try and deal with it. Look, I don't believe, I'm afraid, that we will stop being a target for to these people if we lay off Iraq or lay off Afghanistan. The fact is, you know, America didn't attack Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda attacked America. The people, in respect of Bali, for example, Indonesia isn't known as a country anything to do with the front line of the fight against terrorism. The people that died in Kenya, the people that are dying in these terrorist attacks all over the world at the present time, these are not people who have sought to attack the terrorists. The terrorists have attacked them. And therefore, what I would say to you is I think it depends crucially on two things, actually. First of all, that it is shown, which is why we're not at war today, we're still trying to avoid it through the United Nations, that we show that we've done everything we can to get Saddam to do it voluntarily. And the second thing is, I think there will be a huge responsibility on us if we do undertake conflict to make sure that in the post-conflict situation in Iraq, it is done in a way that protects the Iraqi people, that allows us to lift sanctions from them, that allows us to make sure that their living standards are improved.
We're going to attack around the world anyway, so we're going to go in and kill some more people.
This question about the link with Al-Qaeda, the problem is there is no smoking gun, isn't there? There is no link. And you've said quite frequently that there are things that you know which we don't. Why don't you share it with us this evening then?
Well, I haven't said
where is the link?
I haven't said
where is the smoking gun?
I haven't said there are things that I know that you don't. And I've also very specifically said I've never suggested that Iraq was responsible in some way for September the 11th. What I've said is exactly what I've just said now. That the danger is if you have states that are proliferating or trading or dealing in these weapons, and I just tell you there are more and more states doing so, then at some point, at some point in time, the two threats will come together of terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. Now, the reason for dealing with Iraq is that we've had 12 years of trying to get them to come into United Nations compliance. If we then have to turn around and deal with other countries, we will never be able to deal with them peacefully and diplomatically unless we've made it clear that we are prepared to enforce our will. And therefore, Iraq, if it disarms voluntarily, fine. If Saddam came into compliance with the United Nations resolutions, that would be an end of the matter.
But you see, Prime Minister, the point is this, if I may just make this point, the point is this, every time we listen to Hans Blakes, he says, what we're destroying here are not toothpicks, we're destroying real weapons. Give us more time. And he says, it's not going to take years, it's not going to take weeks, but it could be done in months. Why not give him more time?
And what we say to that, and we say to him and he accepts, is that unless they are fully cooperating, and they're not yet, and no one believes that they are yet,
but the inspector says that they are. They say the level of cooperation is getting better. Just give them more time.
It is beyond doubt that since the troops have gone down there, the cooperation has gone up. Now, I don't think that's very surprising. It's what's happened in the last 12 years. Every time there's a threat of military action, there's some more cooperation. What we need to do, and this is what we're working on at the moment, and in fact, I spoke to Dr. Blix just a short time ago before I came here. What we're working on at the moment is trying to ensure that we make it clear what we're saying by full cooperation. Because the truth is, unless he comes into full cooperation, there is no way these inspectors can find this stuff in some sort of, you know, hide-and-seek game. They've got to have the full cooperation of Iraq.
Let's hear from Nicola Cumberledge.
Yeah, I still don't understand what your main reason is for wanting to attack Iraq. Because I just think that the sort of messages that are out there in the media are just confusing people, and perhaps they're out there deliberately to confuse people. Are you attacking Iraq because, you know, you're sort of following Bush and he wants revenge for September the 11th, and you can justify supporting him by saying, well, we've had weapons inspectors, you know, and they're sort of developing weapons, or they've got weapons of mass destruction, and you can use that as a sort of scapegoat for supporting WW as such. It's just not clear.
Okay. I mean,
everything's just chucked around.
I can understand that. I'm not going to convince you.
And why now?
There was the very clear reason why now and why Iraq is this. For 12 years we've been trying to get into disarm.
So why didn't you go in 5 years ago?
Because we were at that time trying to make the sanctions regime
But
work.
I don't believe that. I think it's because George Bush has instigated this because of revenge for September the 11th.
Well,
you could have gone in there 3 years ago when Clinton was in power, but you didn't.
It's correct.
You haven't instigated it, he has, and you're following.
Well, let me just, can I just answer the point? Up until the end of 1998, we had the weapons inspectors in there. And it was a tale, I'm afraid, of 7 years of being messed about and not being able to do their job properly. Finally, because all the international pressure came off, Saddam said, you're not allowed to go to these sites and these sites and these sites, and the weapons inspectors left. We then... Yeah, they withdrew because they couldn't do their job. I mean,
They
look,
weren't thrown out.
Why didn't you go in then? Why didn't you sort of say we want to go
because
and attack
what we
right
then
now?
tried to do was to tighten up the sanctions rate. Because we have been reluctant to take action, we then tried to tighten up the
If
sanctions
you're
rate.
reluctant to take action,
Sorry, let me
why are
just-
you doing it in 10 days' time? If you're reluctant to take
I know,
action,
will you just
give
let
them
me,
longer.
you know, because otherwise I can't finish the point that I'm making.
If I could just clarify the point, Prime Minister. I mean, you've now given Saddam Hussein 10 days to disarm. If he does...
No, sorry, we haven't, you see, we have not given him 10 days to disarm. We've given him 10 days to show that he intends fully to cooperate with the inspectors.
Okay, 10 days
I'm not
to show...
saying he can disarm everything in 10 days.
Okay.
As Jack Straw said at the Security Council, that would obviously be wrong to say that. What we are saying is, within the next period of time, he should be able to show definitively that he intends fully to cooperate. If he doesn't fully cooperate...
And if he does that, can he stay? If he does that, can he stay?
Of course, we've always made clear, abhorrent though the regime is, and though I think it would be a general act of goodness to get rid of this regime, we've got to work within the terms of the UN resolution, and the purpose of that is disarmament.
So he can stay?
If he does what the UN want him to do, it's always been the case that he can stay.
Is the deadline... May I just sorry, can I just ask the Prime Minister one question on this? Is the deadline then still next Monday, or could that change?
Well, we're in discussion with other countries now. We've laid it down because we believe that gives enough time for him to show that he's fully cooperating. But the very reason why we're negotiating and talking to people is to try and find a way through that brings the UN together. But it's got to be a way through that allows us to uphold the integrity of the resolution we passed in the United Nations last November, when 4 months ago we said, this is it, this is your final opportunity. And we said he had to comply fully, unconditionally and immediately, and he's not complying fully or unconditionally or immediately.
I'd just like to ask one question.
Yeah.
They've been in there for 6 months, right? Why can't we give them more time? Is the life of a British soldier, is the life of an Iraqi innocent child not worth a few more months?
Well, the answer to that is we can give them as much time as they want, provided Iraq demonstrates that it's cooperating fully. Because if we give them as much time as they want, but Saddam is not cooperating, we will be back where we were for 7 years in the 1990s, getting a concession here and a concession there, but actually nothing really happening. That's the worry.
Can I just say that there were two coups to overthrow Saddam, one in 91 and one in 96. And what Saddam did is use the no-fly zones, which were imposed by the West, to actually crush the opposition. Is there no other way of dealing with Saddam? I think we have to separate Saddam as a dictator and the innocent people of Iraq. Yeah. I don't see how you're opting for the moral high ground, saying now we want to liberate the people of Iraq. By bombing them, I don't see how you're liberating them.
Well, first of all, of course there's a clear distinction between Saddam and the Iraqi people, which is why in any conflict that we undertake, it's important that we target the military infrastructure around him. Not innocent Iraqi people. But secondly, I mean, those two attempts to overthrow Saddam, which took place in 1991 and 1996, I think it's correct in the sense that Iraqi people were left in those circumstances to fend for themselves. I think it's important that that does not happen again, and it won't on this occasion.
I'm just talking on behalf of majority of people. They hate Saddam. They hate this regime. We are hating it more than you do. But we do not want war. We would like to have some other peaceful resolution. And I feel that British public has been blind and has been in the backstage, not knowing what other solution could be done to resolve this particular problem, not necessarily going with all this power onto war. Why can't you do other things, other resolution, peaceful one, to get rid of Saddam? This is first. And second, you are saying you are not sure about the casualties which are going to be. 300,000 bombs going to be thrown on Iraqi people in 48 hours. How much exactly casualty we going to have there?
Let the Prime Minister answer,
First
please.
of all, I don't know where you get 300,000. I mean, 300,000 bombs in 48 hours.
It was in The Guardian on the TV.
I can assure you, I am not planning on dropping 300,000 bombs on any Iraqi people. So let's just, and some of the stories there are in the press about what we intend to do in this campaign, well, I'll just, beyond anything, I can assure you we are contemplating. If we go into conflict, we will be targeting the military infrastructure of Saddam specifically, because it's removing him that will be the aim of this. The point that you make, however, is totally reasonable. Of course, it would be good if there was another way of